Now, Ask Dr. Love with psychotherapist, author, love and relationship expert Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. For expert advice on love and relationships, call into the show at 888-463-6748. That's 888-GO-FOR-IT. Or you can submit your question online at AskDrLove.com. Now, here's Dr. Love.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ask Dr. Love. I'm Dr. Jamie Turndorf, and I'm very happy to be with you again today to conclude my discussion of the bullying epidemic in our society. Now, if you were with me last week, you remember I explained what causes bullying. And today I'll be talking about what you can do to end bullying in your world. And then I'm going to be answering 3 questions. In Lady whose parents have threatened to cut her off, I help out a 19-year-old woman who is dating a 30-year-old black man, and she wants to know what she can do to handle her racist parents who are threatening to pull the plug on her education funding if she doesn't end it with her boyfriend. So stay tuned to find out how she can pull the rug out from under her parents before they pull the plug on her. And the second question I'm going to be answering is woman who is being bossed around by her family. And here I'm helping out a 37-year-old divorced woman with a 9-year-old son who wants to get back with her ex after realizing her own mistakes in the relationship. Meanwhile, her parents are bullying her with the threat of cutting her out of their lives if she goes back with her husband. So stick around to find out what she can do to reclaim the reins of her life. And the third question that I picked was how to become less sensitive. And I'm advising a woman who wants to know how she can become less reactive to her boyfriend's way of controlling their conversations. So stay tuned to find out how she can actually use, rather than bury, her negative reactions to benefit herself, her boyfriend, and their relationship. And then, what show will be complete without a reading between the sheets segment? And this question I'm calling Bedroom Bully. And I'm helping out a woman whose husband has turned their sex life into rape, to quote her word. So stay tuned to find out what she can do to put her foot down with his third leg. Alrighty. So now let me get on to the topic of today, bullying part 2. Now, as I said last week, I'm sure everybody who's listening to me has been on the receiving end of bullying, scapegoating, and intimidation at one point in their life. And when you repeatedly observe bullying or are the target of bullying during your formative years, one of 2 things is guaranteed to happen. Either you're going to become a bully yourself or you're going to become a lifelong victim. Now, I want to first talk about how a bullied kid or a witness to bullying in childhood becomes a bully. Now, to understand how this happens, you need to understand a defense mechanism that's called identification with the aggressor. In her classic book, The Ego and the Mechanism of Defense, Anna Freud, who was actually the daughter of Sigmund Freud, introduced 2 original defense mechanisms, both of which have become classics of ego psychology, the one being altruistic surrender and the other being identification with the aggressor. And Anna is the first to point out that identification with parental values is a normal part of the development of the superego, which is the conscience. But Anna also noted that some people get stuck in their superego development when they introject, which is just a fancy way of saying taking into the psyche, when they introject both rebuke and punishment and then regularly project this same punishment onto another person. Now, it so happens that it is through the identification process that we learn to conquer the fear that we have of someone. And the way we conquer the fear is to become more like or more identified with that person. And this is how a bullied child becomes a bully. Now, let me give you an example of this. I'm currently seeing a man whose wife was bullied during her childhood by a brother who was bipolar. Now, he tortured the entire household, and her parents never protected her and her siblings. And she grew up drowning in rage and hating men. Here's what's so tricky. She presents as a victim, but in reality, she's a terrible bully who displays her rage against her brother onto her unsuspecting husband. Now, her husband is a perfect target of her aggression because he keeps coming back for more. This is because his wife is exactly like his very mean mother. And each time she mentally beats on him, the wife that is, he turns into a little boy who always begged his own mother for forgiveness and love, and he literally hands his wife the club to beat him more. And this S&M dance escalated to the point that she brought false charges against him for abuse, got an order of protection, and had him thrown out of the house. And if that's not bad enough, she co-opted her daughters to help her to club him. And here's where you can see the identification with the aggressor at work with her two daughters. She made it her mission to brainwash the girls, telling them that he's an abuser and that they need to stay away from him. And of course, the girls have to go along with her tyranny to identify with the aggressor or else be sliced by the mother's sword. And this explains why, when bullying goes on in families, kids quickly learn to align themselves with the bully to avoid becoming the target of aggression. Now, the same mechanism occurs in the schoolyard. You've seen it or you've been on the receiving end of it, when kids quickly learn to join forces with the bully by ganging up on his or her target so that they don't become a target themselves. The point is, no matter whether you were or are a direct victim of bullying, or you simply observed bullying in your youth, through the process of identification with the aggressor, you are likely going to become a bully. Now I want to give you a roadmap for ending bullying and scapegoating in your world. And obviously, the steps that you're going to need to take are very different depending upon whether you are a bully or you're a victim. All right, so if you're a bully, I want to remind you that scapegoating is difficult to resolve precisely because the motivations for the bullying are unconscious, which makes it easy to deny. And it's also hard to stop because it serves multiple psychological functions. And on top of all these obstacles, scapegoaters and bullies tend to lack empathy, shame, and guilt. So if you're a bully, the way to wake up and face the music is to look at your family life. If you have a kid who's bullying others, it's time to look at yourself in the mirror because children reflect our own behavior back at us. And also, watch how others respond to you. Does your wife or husband shrink in response to you? Do your employees or coworkers fear you? Think of the world as your wake-up call. So pay attention and you'll find out how others experience you. And then face your own dynamics and deal with your anger. Examine family patterns of favoritism and placing the blame on one child. Do a web search on the drama triangle. Take responsibility for your actions. And apologize to the mistreated child, even if your kid is an adult now. And stop playing favorites now. Get into therapy, face your own feelings, and heal yourself. And then learn to live with family members in more productive ways. Now, when all is said and done, when it comes to changing ourselves, the greatest motivator is pain. Obviously, humans seek pleasure and avoid pain. And when it comes to giving up bullying, the greatest obstacle comes from the fact that bullying brings a pleasurable release of tension, of unwanted feeling release, and when the bully discharges feelings of hurt, sadness, anger, and vulnerability and weakness onto others, there is a sense of pleasure. And it's not easy to give up all this pleasure. The only way to break this pattern of behavior is to remove the pleasure and actually make it painful to continue behaving in this way. And all this said, the bullier is going to probably need a helping hand so that the feedback he or she gets from others actually makes it hurt to keep dishing pain on others. Now, what can you do to give a bully a much-needed wake-up call? Now, as I said in the first part of this topic, sweetness and light is not the path to ending a bully's reign of terror. For those on the receiving end of a bully's bull, the natural reaction is, of course, to shrink back in fear. But this reaction only strengthens the bully. Because if you recall, beneath their tough exteriors, bullies are weak and hurting. But if you don't become strong and meet the bully gets worse. So the only way to break through to the weak and vulnerable side of the bully is to break through the hard defensive shell and crack it open. And this can't be done with a light, loving, and tender touch. This means you have to use sufficient emotional force to break the bully's defensive armor. And the way to crack a bully's armor and break through to the wounded child within is to use hard confrontation, meaning you may have to come across as an even bigger bully than the bully. And when you crack the shell, the bullier suddenly remembers what it felt like to be bullied as a kid. And feeling his or her own unbearably painful feelings is the key to ending bullying. And now comes the next step. You've got to help the bullier feel for his or her victim. And when the bullier's pain is palpable, when the bullier feels the pain he or she felt as a kid, now you can evoke what I call partial identification, which is the ability to put oneself in another person's emotional shoes. So now's the time that you ask the question, why would you want to make someone you love feel the terrible pain you felt as a kid? And by encouraging identification with those who are being harmed, you can finally open the bully's heart and access his or her humanity. And it's at this point, when their own hearts are bleeding, that bullies can finally consider the effect of their behavior, of the effect it has on others, and feel empathy for the people they are harming. This is how you break the bully's dance. Now, what should you do if you notice someone being scapegoated? It's not you, but you're seeing it. So I want you to remember the basic principle here is there's strength in numbers. If you see a bully ganging up on one person, you have a choice. You can either join forces with the bully and gang up on the victim, or you can form your own coalition and use the power of the group to stamp out the bully by standing up and speaking out against injustice when you can, by saying, hey, that's not fair. Leave him alone. Make sure you get other family members to join you insisting on fairness, because remember, there is strength in numbers. So break the destructive silence and, when necessary, report abuse to the authorities. Now, in addition, if you know a child who's suffering from scapegoating, show that kid some extra attention and be reassuring that the rest of the world doesn't see him or her as bad. Become a mentor and act as a positive role model, so that the victim can learn to see him or herself as a valuable person, and encourage kids from dysfunctional families to seek out more positive role models. And do not let them accept the poison that is being dumped on them as a result of one family member being a dysfunctional bully. Now, I'm never going to forget the day I was visiting my family in New Jersey, and I was waiting in the street while they shopped in a store. And while I waited, I noticed a mother bullying her child, and she pulled and yanked on his arm while she verbally berated him. Noticing that I was staring, she said to the child, "Look at how that woman is staring at you. You're making a fool of yourself." And without missing a beat, I said to the mother, "I'm not staring at him. I'm staring at you and how badly you're treating the boy." Her mouth dropped open, and she stopped dead in her tracks. And I assure you, from that moment on, that boy never forgot my outrage on his behalf, and he would never forget that what he suffers is wrong. And on another occasion, I was actually riding in the train to New York City, and a mother was verbally bashing her child, berating him and belittling him, and I stood up and told her to stop it. And she shouted at me, "Mind your own business," to which I replied, "This is my business. How you treat your child is everyone's business." Her mouth literally dropped open, and she stopped. And remember, bullies aren't used to being confronted, and when they are put in their place, they melt like cotton candy in the sun. You know, last year I also personally experienced bullying in my own life. Very painful experience for me. A colleague from my professional group in the city introduced me to her adopted son. And the son and I became really good friends. And I took a vacation with her son and the mother. And on the vacation, I was horrified to hear her verbally shout and bash and belittle this kid, telling him that he was an a-hole and so on. And I spoke up right in front of the boy and said that she was abusing him. And the child told me privately that he had had no idea that he was being abused because nobody, not his father or other family members, ever said a word to protect him. And of course, nobody in his right mind wanted a dose of that wrathful viper tongue. But I did pay a terrible price when she turned her wrath on me, but I didn't back down because I fought for this kid without rest. And with my support, he found his own voice and then fought back against her. Deep down, she knew I was right, and the proof is she stopped bullying and tyrannizing that boy. So speak up and be the voice for those who cannot speak. Now, what should you do if you were mistreated or if you are currently being mistreated? Now, this is a really, really tough question. When I come back from my break, I am going to tell you the answer to this question. Be back in a moment.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. AskDrLove.com is the web's premier relationship advice site since 1996. Visit AskDrLove.com to search thousands of free relationship advice articles on any relationship issue you may have. Or you can submit a question to her free advice column. However, if you're listening live, why not call in? Don't be shy. Dr. Turndorf wants to help you, and this is a unique chance to get a personal answer from one of today's most respected experts. So, if you have a question for her, please call in now at 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. Now back to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. I'm talking with you about what you can do to end bullying in your world. And right before the break, I promised that I would talk about what you should do if you were mistreated or if you are currently being mistreated and bullied. Now, if you were or are on the receiving end of bullying, it's your job to hold up a mirror to the bullier, confront the bullier, describe the bullier's behavior, negatively sanction the bullying, and spark partial identification by asking the bullier how he or she would feel to be on the receiving end of the mistreatment that he or she is dishing at you. I'll never forget the time I was working with a father who was bullying his kid. He was filled with total denial, lack of empathy, lack of shame, lack of guilt. And I slammed him hard by saying, I have a bulletin for you. Parent Magazine isn't banging down your door to give you any awards. He looked like I had splashed cold water in his face, but it woke him up because nobody had ever called him on his BS. Now, I want to talk to you a moment about the role that many victims play in their own abuse, and what victims may unconsciously do to remain a victim. Now, this is not a topic that many people talk about because often we'll talk about, the poor victim, the poor innocent victim, and it doesn't help you to take this black and white position because there's always a role that the victim has in being victimized. Now, I have a good example of this in my housekeeper's granddaughter. She was being bullied in school, and the family was up in arms and ready to change schools. But changing schools would never help since the girl is going to take herself wherever she goes. And how do I know that she had a hand in the bullying that she was receiving? Well, she actually gave me the clue. The first day I met her, we were out to dinner in a restaurant. I think it was, I don't know. It was one of those chains. So we're sitting at the table, and she said, right out of the box, I'm a bastard, you know. Now, this declaration was made while we were just sitting down to eat, but she wanted me to know the essential aspect of her life story, that her biological father never claimed ownership of her. Broadcasting this message literally made her a target of aggression because she was giving off a green light that said to those who prey upon the weak, pick me, I'm different, I'm defective. And even if she were to keep the feeling to herself, bullies smell fresh blood, and her vulnerability would still be sniffed out. So she needs to heal her wounded self-esteem. And if you are like this girl, I urge you to read my book, Make Up, Don't Break Up, because in that book I show you step by step how to heal a self that's scarred and to raise what I call your personal net worth. And when you feel better about yourself, you're going to stop being a target who is a victim. Now, if you're a victim, I want you to do whatever it takes to change your part of the dance. And if you were designated the black sheep in the family, be aware of whatever you do now to keep the pattern alive with your parent or parental substitutes like a boss or spouse. And many people who were mistreated fall into the pattern of licking the boot of their abuser, crying, pleading, trying to make the abuser feel sorry for them, to see the error of his or her ways, turning the other cheek, trying to be good in order to win love, hoping that the abuser will see what a good girl or boy you are and finally reward you with love. And another name for this pattern is the repetition compulsion. And I want you to know that playing dead and rolling over only fortifies the abuser and keeps the abuse coming at you. In my book, Till Death Do Us Part, will show you how to break free of that pattern. Now, I also want you to become aware of the fact that there is an unconscious payoff that you may be getting from remaining a victim. So let me explain what I'm talking about. Setting yourself up to be a victim can be an unconscious way of releasing rage. Let me give you an example. I had a patient who as a child used to smash her head into the wall. She'd run full force and knock herself out. And the last thing she thought before going unconscious was, now they're going to suffer when they see how hurt I am. Now, why would a kid voluntarily turn herself into a victim? Here's how it happens. If you're living with a bully or an abuser, you can't come out with your anger for fear of taking a bigger beating. Now, angry feelings either go out or in. And if you can't outwardly communicate your anger, you need to put it back on yourself. And this is how a kid learns to play the victim. Turning rage back on oneself is an indirect way of pointing the finger at the attacker and saying, look at how you wronged me, hurt me, made me suffer. And in no time, this pattern becomes the built-in, natural, automatic way of venting anger. And if this is the only way you know how to get your anger out, you're going to actually look for ways to be victimized so that you can release your anger. But can you see the bind here? The more you get victimized, the angrier you become. And instead of getting to the bottom of your anger barrel, you just become an anger manufacturing plant. So remember, there are no victims, only volunteers. Stop trying to win the favor of a parent or parental substitutes like a spouse who did not like you when you were growing up or don't treat you well now, because that parent or that spouse has a severe personality disturbance and is not likely to change. And the best you can do is understand the underlying dynamics of your parent or your spouse and try to come to peace with this on your own. And don't expect your parent or spouse to own up to having mistreated you. Most likely that the person will only blame you more when you try to get that owning up. Now, some children who were scapegoated have little to do with the abusive parent as they can when they grow up, and refusing to remain in an abusive situation is the healthy choice. And paradoxically, it's only by putting your foot down and refusing to be in the beaten down role that your parent or spouse may see the light. But remember that you aren't putting your foot down to change the other person. You're doing the limit setting for yourself. So join a therapy group, take an assertiveness training class, and learn to set boundaries to other people's inappropriate behavior. And remember, the ultimate solution to ending the epidemic of bullying is for bullies to have the strength to take ownership of their feelings of weakness, hurt, sadness, and anger and work them through rather than dump their pain onto others, for those witnessing bullying to speak up against injustice, and for victims to heal their own wounds. Beware of releasing old anger by playing the victim, and instead find your voice and end the cycle of abuse. Okay? I'm going to take a brief break, and I'll be back with you in a moment.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. If you like what you're hearing, you can learn about Dr. Turndorf's techniques for turning conflict into connection and healing in her critically acclaimed, groundbreaking book, Till Death Do Us Part, Unless I Kill You First, a step-by-step guide for resolving relationship conflict. Find out more about this book and read a free excerpt by visiting AskDrLove.com. This is Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. And if you have a question for her, please call in now at 888-463-6748. This show is for you, the listeners, so please give her a call now. You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. Did any of you notice that I ran over on my last segment, and that was supposed to be my quickie? So I want to at least share with you what I wanted to tell you during the quickies. Let me give you a couple tweets, of course. Here's the first one. Make the choice to find your own voice. That's for everybody who's being victimized. And here, if you're observing scapegoating or bullying, you can pull the plug by ripping out the bully's rug. Or if also you're the victim, you can. And you can remove a bully's pull by letting him or her know that he's full of bull. And remember, bullies are secretly weak. A head-on confrontation will turn a bully meek. And to end bullying once and for all, give a bully a much-needed wake-up call. And here's for the victims. Do you stay a victim who cries in pain as a secret way of laying blame? And last but not least, be the voice for those who can't speak, and you'll teach them how to be less meek. Did you know that there's an extreme example of the identification with the aggressor syndrome in the Stockholm Syndrome? This is where hostages identified with their terrorists. And remember Patty Hearst and the Symbionese Liberation Army? She was abused and raped by her captors, yet she joined their movement and even took part in one of their bank robberies. And at her trial, she was acquitted because she was a victim suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, which is the identification with the aggressor. I also promised in my newsletter, I said I was going to tell you where the term scapegoat came from. I remember my husband had a patient who had all these malapropisms in her speech. It was funny. She called it the scapegoat, which is funny. Now, scapegoat derives from the common English translation of the Hebrew term Azazel, which occurs in Leviticus 16:8. And in ancient Greece, a cripple or beggar or criminal, the pharmakos, was cast out of the community either in response to a natural disaster, such as a plague, famine, or an invasion, or in response to a calendrical crisis, such as the end of the year. And in the Bible, the scapegoat was a goat that was designated La Azazel to be outcast in the desert as part of the ceremonies of the Day of Atonement. And that began during the Exodus with the original tabernacle and continued through the times of the temples in Jerusalem. And of course, in psychology and sociology, the practice of selecting someone as a scapegoat has led to the concept of scapegoating. And you know, there's not much research on scapegoating for all the damage that it does to families and society. But if you want to know more about scapegoating, go to scapegoatdemon.co.uk. All right, so I have some questions that I promised that I was going to answer for you today, and I have to get to that little place in my notes because I can't memorize what these people, my dear audience, ask me. So here's the first one. Lady whose parents have threatened to cut her off. Okay. Dear Dr. Love, I'm 19, white, and in college. And I've been dating a 30-year-old black man for 5 months, and we are madly in love, and we are very happy together. Yet when my racist parents found out, they threatened to cut me off and not pay for college anymore if I continued to see him. What should I do? Wow. First, I gotta say, shame on your parents, because you are in an awful bind, and it's all they're doing, and there are no easy answers here. So the first thing I want you to know is, well, we have to be clear whether you really believe that they would cut you off. Or are they used to bullying you with threats because they know you'll give in to them? My point is, if you have a history of backing down in the face of their tyranny, they have been trained to get away with murder. And this means that they may back down if you call their bluff. This is because, as I said, bullies melt when faced with bigger bullies. So if you were to bully them back and say that you're going to cut them off, you're never going to see them again, and you'll never allow them access to their grandchildren, how would they react? Are they willing to lose all this? Or are they simply playing poker because they are sure you will buckle? Now, only you can say whether they are hot air bullies or whether they will follow through with their threats. Now, we also need to face the fact that your parents are very controlling and they use money to force you to follow their orders. And you need to claim your power, girlfriend, because instead of giving them the reins and allowing them to decide your fate, why don't you decide your own fate? Sooner or later, you're going to need to make your own choices, whether or not they like it, sooner or later. So you might as well take control right now. And you need to feel in your heart that you're willing to give them up because you know that you don't need people like this in your life, family or not. And then they aren't being granted the power to cut you off. You'll be doing the cutting off if they don't back off. Now, mind you, you can't make the move that I'm mentioning unless you are willing to bear the consequences of your actions, to cut them out. And if you aren't willing to take this to the mat, they're going to sense it and you're going to lose all your bargaining power. So if your bullying back approach doesn't work, I would go to a good family therapist with your parents and open up a discussion. And I really want to wish you the best, you and your lover. And I really want to hear how you make out. All right? Now, here's another question that I got. Very upsetting situation in which a woman, a grown woman, is being bossed around by her family. Here it is. Dear Dr. Love, I'm turning to you because I have no one else to talk to. I've been divorced for 7 months, and I've come to realize that much of my unhappiness was my own fault due to many of my problems. And I've lately tried to work things out with my ex. We have a 9-year-old son together, and things are going well. My problem is with my family. They've forbidden me to go back to this person, and I'm 37 years old, yet I'm afraid of what my family will say. However, I feel that I should give this relationship a chance for us and our child. We both have had our faults, but I had some with money, and I'm not telling the truth in not telling the truth that my family doesn't even know about. Now that I have worked through these problems, I think we could be very happy. Do I put my family's feelings aside for me and my child, or do I make the most of our life as I have chosen it? Okay, so the thing is, you're really, really in a rough bind because you can either please your family and lose your husband or reunite with your husband and lose your family. And the real issue here isn't about what choice you make. Rather, it's you need to understand why you would allow yourself to be bossed around by your family. And what you told me that your family forbids you to see your ex, I had this passing thought that you were 13 and still living at home. Now, how come your family thinks that they have the right to tell you what to do? I can give you a clue on this one because you have told them in words and actions that you're going to permit them to treat you in this way. So you need to step back and understand why you're allowing your family to dominate you. Are you afraid that they'll reject you? Are you hoping that they'll love you if you obey them? And there are all kinds of unspoken and probably unrecognized fantasies tied up with your behavior. So to understand where your submissive behavior stems from, you need to look all the way back to your own childhood. Now, if I had to guess, I'd assume that your parents have been controlling you for your entire life. And the way they've always managed to get away with this was by threatening to remove their love if you don't comply. So you learned early in life that in order to ensure their love, you needed to wipe yourself out and just obey them. Now, I'm also fairly sure that your habit of lying developed because you were too afraid to tell them the truth. Now, God forbid you thought, felt, or did something that they didn't approve of. So you also learned to lie and conceal your truth in order to keep their love. Now, some love your parents were and are supposed to set you free so that you can pursue your own destiny. And that's the kind of love that parents are supposed to provide. Now, I can't tell you what to do or say, but what I can tell you is that you need to address this problem head on. Because when you're willing to take your parents on and not accept their bullying tactics, I think you're going to be surprised to find that even they back down and they don't withdraw their love or cut you off even when you disobey their wishes. So now before you can even think about telling them that they are no longer allowed to dictate to you, you have to be willing to run the risk that they will actually cut you off. Because in most cases, when a person is willing to stick up for his or her beliefs and bear the consequences, including being cut off by crazy parents, the threats stop. And this is like a power game. The person who blinks first loses. So before you take any stands, you need to experience a personal transformation. And this is probably only going to happen with the help of therapy. And when you find the strength to put your foot down with your parents, your decision will have already been made and you will follow your heart where it leads, which is back to your husband. And I really have to wish you strength and courage. I also want to say that to be able to stand up to people and call the bluff on their bullying, you have to feel very strong in your own self-love. There has to be this feeling of, I'm my own mother. I'm my own father. And if these destructive people, parents, whoever they are, have to leave my life, so be it. I will be my own parent. So the technique of really raising your personal self-worth, your personal net worth. I talk about this in Make Up, Don't Break Up. I have a whole chapter on how you do this, how you literally systematically reparent and heal yourself. You need to have that strength that you are okay on your own. With that strength under your belt, you can really take care of bullies and back them up because they play upon the fact that you need them. You're weak. And once you're able to say, I don't need you, I have myself, everything turns around. Alrighty, I'm giving you a lot of case examples here that really put the techniques that I'm talking about into practice in your life. So I'm going to take a little brief break, and when I come back, I'm going to answer the next question that I selected. Be back in a moment on Ask Dr. Love Radio.
You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. To speak to Dr. Turndorf live on the air, call 888-463-6748. That's 888-463-6748. If you've recently been through a breakup and are looking for a second chance, wondering how you can reconcile with your ex, or if it's even possible after all you've been through, Dr. Turndorf's latest book, Make Up, Don't Break Up, presents her 5-step plan for reconciling with your ex. This plan was developed out of years of research, working with thousands of couples at her Center for Emotional Communication. This is a proven no-hype and no-nonsense method that gets right to the root of the problem to guide you to the right path towards reigniting a lasting relationship. For more about Make Up, Don't Break Up, visit AskDrLove.com. You're listening to Ask Dr. Love with Jamie Turndorf, Ph.D. Once again, here's Dr. Love.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ask Dr. Love Radio. So here's a question that came in that I selected for you, where a woman is asking me how to become less sensitive. So here's the question. Dear Dr. Love, when my boyfriend and I are discussing something, he can be very contradictory and defensive in his tone and his argument. And this intimidates me from my voicing my opinion and sharing things about my life. And often when I do, he abruptly changes the subject, and often the conversations are only about him. And I told him the defensive tone bugs me and why it does. And he responded first by saying that all his exes have said the same thing and that he would try to change, but he's sick of trying and that he thought it would get better. How do I become less sensitive to his comments when I know he doesn't mean to hurt me and cause him to change his way of speaking? Thank you. Now, you told me that because you know that your boyfriend doesn't mean to hurt you, you want to become less sensitive to his contradictory manner and his defensive tone of voice. Now, if somebody accidentally shoots you with bullets, do the bullets hurt you less because they were shot in error? The point of my rhetorical question is that you can't deny your reaction to his intimidating behavior. So rather than deny your feelings, use them in service of yourself and of your relationship. That is, I don't want you to act on your feelings of intimidation by silencing yourself or avoiding conversation with him. Instead, call him on his misbehavior right in the moment. Now, when he's contradictory and defensive, I want you to describe what he's doing and tell him the effect his behavior has on you, that you feel the urge to shut him up, and then ask him if he wants to shut you up, because your boyfriend needs to be made aware of his behavior right when he's behaving inappropriately. Now, he knows in theory that he's out of line because other women have told him so, and he's admitted this to you. But he isn't aware of precisely what he's saying and doing that lands wrong. And the way to help him to change is to make him aware of his behavior in the moment that he's misbehaving, so he can see what he's doing when he's doing it. Now, I'd also tell him that thinking that it, meaning his misbehavior, would get better sounds like he believes in magic, because behavior doesn't change by itself. He has to change. He has to choose to change, and he has to become a willing and active participant in the process of self-change. He has to welcome your input each and every time he acts out, and then he needs to work on finding a more appropriate way of communicating his feelings. Now, the problem with your boyfriend is that he acts out his feelings by behaving defensively and intimidating you. And he needs to stop acting out and start verbalizing his feelings. And both of you can work together to help him to achieve this goal. So what he needs to do is realize that the behavior he's engaged in is the end result of a long chain of events that include all kinds of thoughts and feelings. And he's jumping over the thoughts and feelings and going straight into defensive and intimidating actions. The actions aren't productive for him or for the relationship. The actions don't communicate what he's really thinking and feeling. Plus, the actions lead to fallout because he drives women away from him, including you. So the next time he has the urge to intimidate and defend and verbally bully you, he needs to say and do nothing until he figures out what feelings he has. And when he knows what he feels, he is to use my XY formula to describe what was said or done and how he feels about it. And no more acting out. And what you can do to help him stop acting out is the next time he does act defensively or he starts to intimidate you or bully you verbally, stop him dead in his tracks and ask him to describe his feelings. And you might say to him, "Do you know what you're feeling right now?" Or you might say, "You're acting defensive, and I wonder what I said or did to get your back up." Now, the key is he needs to learn to put his thoughts and feelings into words and stop acting them out in relationship-destructive ways. Helping him to talk to you will be beneficial for everybody because he's going to grow, your relationship is going to thrive, and you, above all, are going to face a difficult situation head-on rather than running away. Now, your courage to face him and not run is a win-win situation because your bravery is going to help you to grow in so many ways. And as you grow, so will he. All right? Now, I promised. What Ask Dr. Love show is complete without reading between the sheets. So here's the question that came in that I was really, really shocked by, where the woman, she titles it A Strange Problem, but it's way more than a strange problem. Here it is. "Hi, doctor. I want to tell you one of my problems. I'm married and a mother of a child, and a year back I got married, and the problem is that my husband has turned lovemaking into rape. He hardly caresses or gives foreplay, and what he does is take off my clothes and intercourse after 5 kisses. And I'm getting upset, and I want to get rid of this nonsense and humiliation." Okay, so listen. You've asked me how to help you rid your life of this nonsense and humiliation. Keep in mind that even if we curtail his behavior, the emotional conflict that's triggered his actions is going to remain unresolved. So this means that he's going to continue to press you for these rape sessions, which is going to fuel greater resentment in you, or he's going to sit on his urges and resent you for depriving him, and his anger is going to come out another way. So my point is we really need to get to the bottom of why your husband has changed his sexual behavior, because obviously behavior follows thoughts and feelings, albeit unconscious. It's said that 95% of everything we do and say comes out of the unconscious. So unless you identify and resolve the cause of his behavior, the unconscious causes, the urge to repeat the behavior is always going to rear its ugly head again, and I am referring to his little head here. So to begin, ask him if he's noticed that his sexual behavior has changed, and ask him if he has a sense as to why. And I notice you said that you're a mother of a child. Now, I don't think that your child is his, but I just want to make sure that his sexual behavior didn't change after you gave birth to his child. Because I've worked with men who've lost their sexual feelings for their wives after the wives gave birth, and in more than one case, the loss of desire was traced to the man viewing his wife as mother. And since it's taboo to have sexual desire for mom, it was clear why the man's sexual desire went on the fritz. Now, your husband could still be viewing you as mom, even if you didn't have a child with him. And there's a phenomenon called the mother transference, which refers to the universal shift that occurs in a married man's mind. And usually by the second year of marriage, a man comes to view his wife as his mother. And along with this mother transference comes all the feelings he had for his mother. And if the man was angry at his mother, his wife becomes the new target. So there's something very hostile about your husband's behavior. Degrading you sexually is an act of aggression. And we won't know if he is transferring rage that's meant for his mother onto you until you talk more with him. And it's also possible that the mother transference has inhibited him sexually, since it's not kosher to have sexual feelings toward mom. So I wonder if he's going out of his way to treat you like a whore, which is as far from mother as he can get. But all this is theory. We need to get with him and have him working on the issue with you. And if he refuses to engage in a meaningful discussion, then you have to go to marriage counseling with him. And meanwhile, you have to put your foot down with his third leg and refuse to allow him to degrade you. Adequate foreplay is his ticket to ride. And if he doesn't give you enough foreplay, then no ride for him. Remember, he can't degrade you without your consent. So stop consenting to sex that doesn't feel right. And if necessary, starve him out. That'll get him running to counseling. So let me know how you make out. All righty. I actually have time to answer one other question on bullying, so let me do that for you now. This one is called Man Who's Been Told That He Has the Mind of a 10-Year-Old. And here it is. Dear Dr. Love, I am a 45-year-old white male who is handicapped. My dad told me that the doctors do not know what type of handicap it is. I lost oxygen after I was born, and my IQ is 75%, and I am borderline retarded. Dad says I have a mind of a 10-year-old kid, and I'm dating this 30-year-old part black. Her skin looks mainly tan, like she's from Hawaii or from the beach. Woman, my dad does not want me to date her, and he says it is not because of her skin color. And I do love her very much, and I've been dating her since May of 2000, but Dad wants me to break it off. So I did like I was told, and I did not like it, so I went back with her. And one day my heart told me to go to the store and buy her an engagement ring, his and hers wedding bands. And I surprised her with them. And then one day at the pizza place in the mall, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And then we had lunch and we left. Meanwhile, Dad and his new wife, they were overseas on vacation. And the next day I got an email from my dad saying, it's okay to marry, just be careful. So I was happy, and she was too. And then the next day Dad called, and I thanked him. And then he said, I did not say anything about getting married, and then I went to work. And the next day my new stepsister came over to meet her, and we three had lunch. And then she took the email with her overseas to show Dad, and they both talked, and she told me that I did not work. And so then my sister called and told me to take the ring back. And I was so happy that I told her I got the rings that I emailed her, or she was going to have Dad come home early to deal with me. And I told her I would. And I did take the ring back, but I told my girlfriend my girlfriend got upset. And so Dad and his wife came home and called me, and he asked me if anyone was in the apartment, and I told him my girlfriend was. And he told me to get rid of her, or he was going to come over and get rid of her, ask her to leave. So I sent Dad an email with a file in it, and I told him how I felt and that I was so happy. And Dad got madder and sent me an email back saying, I took all your money out of your account. Do not write any checks or they will bounce. And then he sent another one saying he's still a payee over my money. And he told me a few weeks ago that he can make it so that I can't do anything without checking with him. And I do not know if this is true or not. But if we both love each other and are happy, shouldn't we be together? Dad did say that what he did was the consequence of my actions. And it seems that consequences are bad things that happen. And it seems that because of a mistake, which is no one's fault, I end up paying for it. So my question is this. Is there anything that I can do legally to keep this woman that I love and keep things good with the family? And I do not know if Dad can stop me from getting Social Security disability or not, because I work part-time. And Dad says that he's older and he knows that women want to use me for my money. Oh, this is a very, very sad story. So listen, I'm so upset to hear what you're being put through, and your father is behaving as though you are a complete mental incompetent, which clearly you're not. And your letter was logical and beyond the type of letter that a 10-year-old would write. Now, I know your father's afraid that you're going to be taken by any woman that you marry, and in his twisted way, he thinks he's protecting you. And the problem is that this form of protection consists of crushing the life right out from you. And your father acts like a dictator, and he's not willing to consider any position but your own. So I think that you're buckling under his threats because you don't know what your rights are. And you need to find a good therapist who can help you find a way of sticking to your guns and not allowing yourself to be crushed by your father. You may need an advocate, The therapist can help you. You perhaps have your father come to sessions with you and talk about your father's concerns for protecting you without his being such a bully. Your father isn't stupid, so he surely knows that there are ways to protect a person's assets even after marriage. So I think with the therapist, you're going to talk about why else he thinks he needs to rule you. Why does he need to be in control? What reward does he get out of your staying helpless? These things you can talk about with the therapist. You need an ally, and your father cannot stop you from receiving Social Security disability benefits. And I think if you have an advocate, even go to your local mental health department to get a social worker and an advocate, because there are ways that you can protect yourself from your father's tyranny. And with advocacy, you can get that done. All right. I wanted to just tell you before I stop that I love being with you. One of the most perplexing things is obviously I can't see your face. So my webmaster is putting in a new feature called tweeting so that you can tweet me during the radio shows. Now, I know a lot of people, most people, thousands of people listen to the shows after the fact. Obviously, you can't tweet me if you're not listening live. But if you are live and you want to tweet me, I'd love to hear from you. Give me feedback or ask me a question. And I'm also going to be putting commenting about the radio show online so that you can give me feedback about how the shows are working for you, if there's something you want me to talk about, so that I can have more of an interaction with you, which I would really like. So that's all I have for you now. And what I want you to remember from today's show is you have the power to end bullying in your life, whether you're a victim, observing bullying, or you are a bully. End bullying in your world. Take the power, take the reins. All right. I will see you next week on Ask Dr. Love Radio. Take care.